So before we start, I do have a second channel. So if you are interested in more content that isn't related to anime and manga, consider going over there and subscribing. Also, if you end up enjoying this video, consider leaving a like. I'd greatly appreciate it. So I thought, because it is the beginning of December, that I would reflect on this year in terms of manga. So the first section of this video is going to be looking at the most sold and successful manga of this year within Japan. We recently got the numbers for it. It's very interesting. It's very exciting. A lot of you probably won't care, may not even care, but it's still a good thing to look at and hopefully gauge some sort of list for next year. For some reason, it's just enjoyable to see how well certain series are selling. So we're going to be looking at the top 10 of this year. And the second section of this video is going to be my personal top 5 manga of this year. This is stuff that has released this year, or maybe stuff that I have read only as of this year. And it's going to go in not necessarily specific order, but more so stuff that I've just personally enjoyed. So there is kind of a ranking for it, but I don't really care for rankings, so you can kind of change them around, but more so just personal preference, not what series is better than the other. So with that, let's begin.
Will I sing with a magnificent pair of bananas? Oh, great heavens!
So starting off with the most successful manga of this year. It's a very interesting list. The numbers are extremely high. A lot of it is just massive increases in popularity for specific series. I think the overall success has also gone up rather drastically, but not in comparison to like the top 3, if that makes sense. Starting off, we have Haiku at number 10 with 4.3 million copies sold. I should also clarify, this is only within Japan. A lot of these series have English releases and sell very heavily outside of Japan as well. But Haiku, 4.3 million sold. Very incredible considering the story has been ended for what I feel like is almost a year and a half, 2 years now. It has not released a single chapter this year, and still it has reached the top 10. It's a sports manga, which in comparison to everything else that's really successful, sport mangas are either very hit or miss. So seeing it do extremely well and people still falling in love with it, still buying it, still supporting it is an incredible thing to see. In number 9, we have Kingdom with 4.6 million copies sold, which is a little bit surprising that this has dropped so far. Usually Kingdom sits within the top 3, top 5 realm, but considering the overall number is rather higher than usual, it's somewhat evened out the playing field for other series to kind of sneak up the ranks more and more. So I think Kingdom is an incredible series. It's always within the top 10, top 5, and it does not have a English release nor realistically a good anime. So the fact that it's so popular without any of the normal benefits that a lot of these other series have is always a really impressive thing to see. But coming in at number 8, one that I am very, very happy about, Spy X Family with 4.9 million copies sold. This is honestly one of the most impressive series to be in here, considering everything that it is. It is not a action manga in the sense of battle shonen, etc, etc. It's got a lot of comedy within it. It is not weekly, it is bi-weekly, and it is also not published within Weekly Shonen Jump. Since it's published in Jump Plus, it is only available in a digital format. It's not published within a physical magazine every single week. So the fact that this is in here without an anime, only published digitally, releases every 2 weeks, is an extremely impressive thing. And I couldn't be more happy to see it in here thriving, and I am super excited to see what happens next year. When its anime releases, I assume this number is easily going to double, triple, quadruple if anything. It's going to skyrocket. So I am very excited to witness that. Moving on to number 7, we have another one that I'm very happy to see in here, Chainsaw Man with 5.2 million copies sold. Honestly, rather surprising considering not a single chapter has been released this year. The story for part 1 of Chainsaw Man has been concluded since early December of last year. It's almost been a singular year. So the fact that it has a lot of popularity behind it, a lot of people are really excited for it, and it doesn't have an anime, which it is getting one next year. I hope to see this and Spy X Family blow up exponentially, and will most likely sit within next year's top 5, not to mention Chainsaw Man Part 2 potentially releasing next year as well. So these series realistically are just getting started, but I'm very happy to see them within here. Moving on, this one's going to surprise a lot of people. Coming in at number 6, we have One Piece with 7 million. This is still a very impressive number, obviously a decent gap between Chainsaw Man, but for a lot of One Piece fans, this is going to feel very unusual. One Piece is a story that is obviously critically acclaimed, it's well renowned, it's got a massive legacy and history behind it, and it's one of, if not the most successful manga of all time, which is indicative to its length, its quality, its anime, which recently just aired its episode 1000, so it's rare to see it drop out of the top 5, considering it's usually always the most sold, or at least the top 3. I think this alone has showcased a big shift in a lot of people's attention, especially the newer generation, and this recent increase or rise in popularity that Demon Slayer gave birth to. It's not a bad thing that One Piece has dropped out of the top 5. I don't want to kind of frame it in that sense. I think this is just a really interesting showcase of what the newer generation and the newer attention for storytelling is leaning towards, mixed with this bloom and popularity in the manga industry that Demon Slayer gave birth to. Moving on to number 5, not necessarily a surprising one, but the fact that it is here in this position is definitely surprising, is My Hero Academia with 7 million, just a little bit more than One Piece. I've only continuously heard great things about My Hero, especially with a lot of its more recent arcs and how massive and climatic everything is getting. I believe it is leading towards its ending at this point, but there is certain pockets of stuff that people aren't really happy with or feel very out of place, or maybe Horikoshi is getting rushed or not really sure on what to do, but regardless, a lot of people are really happy, they are enjoying it, and it has sold extremely well, which is always great to see. Coming in at number 4, we have Attack on Titan with 7.3 million. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory, even though the ending is very divided in a lot of different aspects. It has still sold a massive amount of numbers, and to see it within the top 5 is a very nice send-off for the story, considering this is probably the last time we may see it within here. But then again, potentially we could see it next year, because it's part 2 of its final season of anime is airing this month, I believe, so that's probably going to drive a lot more sales towards the manga. Now the top 3 are actually pretty close, but infinitely more massive than Attack on Titan. So Attack on Titan had 7.3 million, right? Coming in at number 3, we have Tokyo Revengers with 24.9 million. A massive gap. It has been a big year for Tokyo Revengers. I personally haven't read it, but its anime has brought a whole new realm of popularity to this manga, and it has obviously sold extremely well because of it. A lot of people have fallen in love with the manga, with the anime, and it's just made for a very incredible experience, and I'm more than happy to see it up here as well. Coming in at number 2, we have Demon Slayer with 29.5 million copies sold. I don't think this one is much of a surprise for people. What is surprising is the fact that it has been ended for, I think, over a year now, and it is still selling extremely well. This is obviously going to be boosted and aided by the movie that they released, which was massively well received, as well as the announcement for its second season. So, I mean, for a lot of series on here, depending on where their second season releases or when their next slice of their anime releases, I wouldn't be surprised if we continued to see massive numbers for Demon Slayer going into next year, as well as Attack on Titan and any other series in here. Coming in at number 1, however, we have Jujutsu Kaisen with 30.9 million copies sold. I am extremely happy to see this here. It has blown up around the globe and has kind of introduced people to a whole new realm of storytelling, or a newer generation of storytelling, which is a lot more faster, if that makes sense. It's very quick to get to its points. Its pacing is very precise and straight to the point, and sometimes it can be very overwhelming. It can be very scary, but it's very easy to fall in love with. It's very easy to follow and enjoy, and there's so much depth behind it that just thrives because of it. Akatami has planned the story out extremely well, so I am more than happy to see it kind of take the crown this year, so to speak. And it was very close between Demon Slayer and Jujutsu Kaisen, basically half of a singular volume, considering both a single version of their volumes sell extremely well, but very close. If anything, this top 10 list is rather interesting. A couple of to be expected series in here, but some change up that's for sure. And seeing Chainsaw Man and Spy X Family in here, which are kind of the youngest of all of them, is brilliant, and I couldn't be more than happy for them. Now moving on to my top 5 manga. I want to clarify that this is my personal preference, my personal enjoyment, not necessarily what series is objectively better, because I don't really care to funnel it down that route. It's mostly just what series that I enjoyed the most. And a lot of them are very close. So there is a ranking, but you don't really have to stick to it all too much. It's kind of up to you really. But an honorable mention, just to kind of get this one out of the way, that is not within my top 5 is Attack on Titan. There is a very good reason for this. I really enjoyed the experience of reading Attack on Titan's ending. I've been reading the story for close to 10 years now. I think maybe 8 years. So when the story finally came to an end, it was very nostalgic and bittersweet and saddening, but just joyous as well. Seeing a story that I have followed for so long finally come to a conclusion, regardless of the kind of rift that it's caused between the community, was a very eye-opening experience. Unfortunately, however, because of that rift, because of the very vocal communities that were back and forth, and just how much the media or internet wanted to kind of break apart and fraction Attack on Titan's community even further, not really have a civil conversation about its ending, it's kind of just turned into a dogfight at this point. You can't say that you like it without getting disrespected. You can't say that you hate it without getting disrespected. So whatever you like or hate about Attack on Titan, that's entirely up to you. You can love it, you can hate it, that's your opinion, right? For me, as someone that created a lot of content surrounding it, it unfortunately soured my ending for it. I did not want to talk about it. I still don't want to talk about it. I don't want to mention anything about it, to be honest. As much as I could milk it for so much money, so much more content, I really don't want to touch anything around it until I feel like either I can bring an interesting conversation or it just feels right to do so. Maybe that is sooner rather than later, or maybe it's not at all. Long story short, because of how much I'm entwined with content creation and my enjoyment for reading, they kind of go hand in hand and they conflate a little bit. So it soured my ending and kind of made me push past it very quickly, kind of leave it in the back of my mind and not really worry about it whatsoever. I still really enjoyed it, but it's not within my top 5. It's an honorable mention. Obviously, starting off with my number 5, I have 2 here actually. I'm gonna split them. Kaiju number 8 and Spy X Family. Both of these very incredible manga within Jump Plus have had a phenomenal year. Very enjoyable. Just something that you can read potentially on its own or in between other series, depending on what you're doing, and just have a whole lot of fun with it. Nothing overly serious, but serious enough for you to care, for you to feel so drawn into the story, and both of them do it extremely well. Spy X Family just recently finished a very massive arc that it went into. Kaiju number 8 seems to always be in some massive situation or altercation, and it hasn't really slowed down since its beginning. So they're very incredible to read. I always have a lot of fun with them, and they are easily within my top 5 this year. Coming in at number 4, we have Mob Psycho 100. I read this recently, just this year, and I also made a video on it, if you're interested in watching it. Absolutely loved this series. I honestly thought I wouldn't, considering I've seen so much about it that just threw me off a little bit, and admittedly, I did judge it by its cover. I thought it was a variation of One Punch Man, which was more comedy-filled, and a lot of you know I'm not the biggest fan of comedy, so I tend to avoid it. But I gave it a chance, I finally bit the bullet, and I absolutely loved it. I couldn't have been more wrong about Mob Psycho. There is so much nuance and depth and just this portrayal of a character that feels so both genuine and authentic, but also so lost and confused at the same time. Very purposefully, it's intended to be that way, and they swell together to create such an engaging experience. So I'm very happy that I read it this year, and maybe because of it, I'll eventually catch up to One Punch Man and check it out fully, and maybe change my interpretation of that series. Coming in at number 3, we have Trail of Blood. Not a lot of people talk about this story. I completely understand why, but my goodness, this year for a Trail of Blood has been nothing short of revelation after revelation, shocking moment after shocking moment, the most heart-raking stuff that you could experience, the most disturbing, and definitely the most tragic, emotionally fueled, etc, etc. There is so much tension within this series, and this year has been nothing but constant tension. So many twists and turns, filled to the brim with unexpected information and artistic interpretation that is just phenomenal. I have loved every moment of it, and if you're looking for something to kind of of make you sick to your stomach or hold your breath or make you anxious or nervous or maybe something even disturbing, A Trail of Blood is 100% for you. And I would continuously recommend you go read it if obviously that is something that you're into time and time again. Loved it. Very excited to see where it goes, and I believe it's kind of leading to its conclusion soon, so I'm interested to see what it does. Coming in at number 2, maybe a little bit surprising for people, we have Jujutsu Kaisen. I have adored quite literally everything that Kaisen has done this year. There has not been a dull moment. Some very incredible high stake moments, some beautiful building blocks for the foundation of the culling games, and now currently we are within the culling games, the very early stages of it. So I've had so much fun with it. It's been nothing but enjoyable, and I am extremely excited to see how next year goes for it. But there can only be one series that sits at the top, one that has caught my attention the most, that has surprised me the most, that has shocked me the most. This series, sitting at number 1, is none other than Dan. To be entirely honest, when I first read this series, I was surprised for 2 different reasons. One, I absolutely loved how it kind of followed the similar route that Fujimoto took, considering the author of Dan was Fujimoto's assistant. But then I was also nervous on how it would continue to thrive from here. Stories like Chainsaw Man, like Dan are very difficult to conceptualize because they're very crazy, they're very chaotic, they're very all over the place, and if it's not sophisticated, if it's not detailed, if it doesn't have a structure behind it, a lot of people get burnt out. They get kind of thrown all over the place. They feel like it's too overwhelming and you're going to lose a massive portion of your readers. Chainsaw Man had this finesse. That's why a lot of people really loved it. And I was worried if Dan, considering this was the author's first work, would actually succeed in being able to build that structure. They did, 100% with ease. Dan has been the most enjoyable series for me to read this year, and personally because it's right up my alley of stories. I absolutely love the chaoticness behind it, the quirk, the humor, the kind of out of control interpretation of things, but also the uniqueness of it. Like, as much as it falls down the route of being Fujimoto-esque, because it is heavily inspired by Fujimoto, it has its own sense of authenticity, its own style, its own aesthetic, and I think it's heavily addicting. I think it's heavily effective not only for myself but for other authors. They see this and they realize this creator has so much freedom, so much flexibility within not only the story but the artistry behind it. Everything or anything they would like to do, they do it in a very interesting and creative way. This freedom is addicting, creates for very enjoyable stories, and for me personally, this is what kind of allured me to Dan, something that I continuously look forward to every single week, and that I am extremely excited to read every single week. So for me, Dan is my top 1. It is my favorite story of this year, and it only has like 30 odd chapters, so it's impressive to say the least. I absolutely love it. I'm very excited to see where it goes from here, and I wish all the best for it. I do wonder if an anime would blow it out of proportion in terms of sales or popularity, which at this rate, only time will tell. Endtime. So welcome to the end of the video. If you have made it this far, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you very much. These are the most successful manga of this year and my favorite manga of this year. Hopefully this has been somewhat of an interesting conversation, but the real question that I have for you, that I would love for you to answer, is what is your top 5 manga of this year? Or maybe top 3, whatever's easier for you really. What is your favorite handful of manga of this year? Could be literally anything. Could be stuff that has only released this year, or it could be something that you finally read this year, like me with Mob Psycho. Also, how do you feel about the sales number for some of the most popular manga of this year? You surprised by Kaisen or Attack on Titan, My Hero, Chainsaw Man, Spy X Family, etc, etc? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. But with that, I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Leave a like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Drink plenty of water, and I will see you within the next one. Goodbye.